Did you know that you can animate any characters without actually learning anatomy?
NANI?!
That's right. In this video, I'm going to show you a specific technique that animators and storyboard artists use in their workflow to draw and animate characters, and it doesn't involve any anatomy at all. It's called shorthand drawings, and today I will show you how to develop this technique and apply it in your workflow. We will start with understanding the different ways to draw the human body. Then we will go over a technique on developing our own way of drawing shorthands. And finally, we will end with a little demo of how to animate using this technique. Stick around till the end because I will be providing some cool resources and cheat sheets related to this video. Now, let's go over some of the key points when drawing the human body. Proportion-wise, we generally use the head as a form of measuring the height, and an average adult male is about 7 to 8 heads, while the average adult female is about 6.5 to 7 heads. Now, this can vary differently depending on style as well as characteristics of the character, but generally, this is a good starting point. The bottom of a crotch is the halfway point of the whole body, and the hands lines up with this perfectly, while the elbow lines up with the bottom of the ribs right here. The knees are at the halfway point of the whole leg, making the lower leg a bit smaller than the upper leg. Also, men will tend to have wider shoulders than their hips, while the female will have a wider hips than their shoulder. Keep in mind that these are just general key points regarding proportions that you need to remember when drawing the human body. But like I said, proportions can vary depending on the design and age of the character. But for now, we can use this as our baseline when drawing the human body. The first way to draw the human body is called the skeleton, which is probably the simplest of them all. This is probably what you can consider as level 1 in terms of drawing the figure because it almost resembles a stickman figure but with simple shapes for the head, ribs, and the hips, while the arms and the legs will just be lines. And because of this simplicity, we can focus on 3 key points: the spine, the shoulder line, and the hip line. This is very important for creating dynamic poses. Now, when drawing the figure using this technique, we can start with a simple head shape. I like to use more of a rounded box for the head to identify the direction of the face better. Then I draw the spine up to the crotch. This line should follow some sort of an action line, and the more dynamic the pose is, the more curved and bent this line can be. Then I identify the shoulder and hip line. For better looking poses, it is best to make sure that these two lines are not parallel with each other. Then we can draw the outline of the body, creating a simple trapezoid shape for both the ribs and the hips. It is also a good idea to show some three-dimensionality by adding lines to denote volume like this. Then I draw the arms and legs with simple lines, and I just do some circles and triangles for the hands and feet. This way of drawing the figure gives a good foundation on understanding proportions, the line of action, and the shoulder and hip tilts. If you are a beginner, it is best to do a bunch of these as a daily practice for about 10 to 15 minutes a day. And make sure you are using references and taking notes of your observations and mistakes as you do this. It is very important to make an effort to be aware of your own mistakes so you can correct them and get better one step at a time. Now, while this is a good starting point in drawing figures, it can be quite limited, especially when trying to understand the three-dimensionality of the human body. This is why another way to draw the figure is through the use of simple forms. This is basically breaking down the body into spheres, cubes, and cylinders. The head can be a simple egg shape. The body will still have these simple trapezoid shapes, but this time we'll just add some volume on it by distinguishing the side and front planes. Now for the limbs, the biggest difference we have from doing the skeleton is that this time we will be using cylinders. We can also draw these small spheres to connect them, and we can use blocks and triangles for the hands and the feet. When drawing the human body this way, it is very easy to understand the underlying structure of the body, which helps with complicated poses where the body is rotating, bending, or even twisting. One thing you can do to practice as well is to trace over the reference with these forms so you can see how each form is connected to each other, especially in perspective, where they can be overlapping. If you know your way around drawing boxes and cylinders in perspective, then this won't be an issue for you. But I'm curious, do you want a video about the different exercises you can do every day to strengthen your drawing fundamentals? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, as much as this is a very solid way of drawing the figure, it tends to ruin the overall gesture of the pose, and it's very time-consuming. This is where scribbling shapes come into play. In this technique, instead of carefully drawing each form accurately, we are focusing on scribbling shapes. This is somewhat a variation of a method called contour lines, where we are drawing the human figure with one continuous line. But for this technique, I tend to draw each part of the body with simple shapes one step at a time. I start with the head, and then the body, and then followed by the limbs. I also create some sort of center line for this to clearly define the planes and rotation of the body and the head. With this method, it is very easy to create dynamic poses due to the freedom you get through scribbling. You can even draw your lines lightly for the first pass and then go over it and define it as soon as you are happy with the shapes you are making. Most of the time, this is the way I actually draw my figures when I'm doing my rough animations. I tend to use this method in combination with the next method of drawing the figure, but before we get into that, make sure you stick around so you can see this method of animating roughs and layouts in action. Now, the next method of drawing the figure is called the silhouette, which is the other technique I tend to do in combination with scribbling the shapes. In this method, we are only focusing on the outline of the pose and doing our best to still capture the proportions and the energy of that pose. It is still important that you do your best to be loose when drawing and only focus on the overall shape. If it's easier to trace the outline of the reference you are using and then copy it, then you can do that too. While this method can look a little bit simpler than the others due to the less lines that you are drawing, it is actually a bit trickier because it relies on the principle of less is more. Being able to show the essence of the pose or clearly defining the key poses with just the silhouette takes a skill that only comes from understanding the figure underneath that silhouette. As I said, I use this in combination with scribbling shapes to see if I can create poses with great silhouettes and outlines, especially for the key poses. While there are actually a bunch more complicated ways to draw the figure, we won't go over them as the focus of this video is about shorthand drawings, and by definition, it's a technique to simplify the characters and figure in its most recognizable trait. The way to actually develop your own shorthand drawings will have to come from practicing the simple ways of drawing the figure first and somewhat figuring out which one is the best for you. It's all about the simplification of the character. So let's go over one of the best way to go about it. Let's say you want to create a shorthand for Seiko Ayase from Dandadan. The very first thing I want to do is to simplify all the shapes that make her unique as a character. This usually means understanding the overall shape of the head, the hair, the clothes, without going over the unnecessary details. Proportions are also a part of this practice where we need to make sure the proportions of each part of the body is accurate with the character. Once you trace the big shapes, you can now copy it or even practice drawing the shorthand version of a character doing various poses while making sure that the shape design and proportions are consistent throughout. This is basically how storyboard artists and animators draw professionally when doing storyboards and rough animations. Now, the next part is a demo of me doing a rough animation of a character doing a combo that ends in a bat swing. This is the reference I'll be using, and for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use the shorthand we did earlier of Seiko from Dan Da Dan as the character. Now, as I said earlier, the first step is always understanding the proportion, shape design, and distinct characteristic of this character, which we did earlier. After that, I then started animating her using the reference I have by focusing on drawing the key poses while ensuring the gesture and flow of the animation is good and the overall movement reads well. For the first drawing, I actually spent too much time drawing unnecessary details, but after the second drawing, I realized that this was not my natural way of animating. So from that moment, I am not focused on drawing the details of the characters anymore, just the overall silhouette and rough shapes. This is the part where a super rough way of drawing is more beneficial because a rough sketch is a lot easier to change when you make a mistake. Again, I'm using combination of scribbling shapes and silhouette technique when I'm animating my shorthands. I'm also trying my best to be as loose as possible, focusing on the key points like the line of action, shoulder and hip tilts, and contrapposto. I don't usually draw these key points, but I try to ensure that my poses are more dynamic where it needs to be. Action poses like this will be naturally dynamic. However, depending on the reference you are using, they may look a little bit stiff, and that is where you want to reiterate and explore. This is again one of the reasons why you want to have an easy shorthand to draw. I would even simplify as much as I can by not drawing some of the parts of the body at all. One thing I want to mention is that I would often draw the feet and legs first to ensure that I stay grounded in the animation and adjusting accordingly as I go. I did draw using onion skin as well to make it a lot easier to see the previous position of the pose, as the reference is actually moving towards us and getting bigger as he moves. I'm not going to bore you with unnecessary time-lapse of the process at this point, but in the end, I was able to actually draw 19 super rough shorthand keyframes like this in just less than an hour. Now, I may actually clean this animation or explore and change some of the poses at some point, but it's good enough for now for the purpose of this video. However, if you want to try and clean it up yourself, or at least use this as a guide to do your own animation, you can find the link down in the description below for the Clip Studio Paint file of this animation and the notes we had earlier. Alternatively, you can join my Patreon like these amazing Ganga warriors and masters, which gives you access to these files as well as a bunch more resources and cheat sheets that will help you get better in animation. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video, and I appreciate you all for supporting this channel in any way you could, and I'm really glad I could help a lot more aspiring animators and artists get a bit better each video I make. Once again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.